All right. I think the influx of participants has slowed down, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Um, two more. So my name is Bethany Fauché. I'm the Stewardship and Outreach Director for the Coastal Prairie Conservancy, and I'm also on the team with our partners for the Texas Coastal Prairie Initiative. And this is a regional initiative with many state agencies, including Texas A&M AgriLife and the partners that we're featuring today in our webinar. One thing I wanted to mention, we are constantly developing outreach programs for Texas land managers and landowners through the Coastal Prairie Initiative, and you can always find those on our outreach tab here. So under events, there's today's Valentine's themed webinar with Dr. Megan Clayton and Dr. Tony Falk. And then we do have a partner event coming up, which we're pretty excited about. And we're trying to develop a prescribed burn association here on the Upper Texas coast. We haven't had one before, and it's a big gap in fire management in our state. So the Nature Conservancy, with a few other partners, is going to host this meeting. And if you're in this area, Waller County, Harris County, Galveston, Brazoria, this Upper Coast region, this is a great meeting to attend if you're interested in helping to get a prescribed burn association started. And you'll get training through that and support for managing your lands through prescribed fire. So that's Monday, March 18th in the evening at Brazoria County Precinct 2's location, and dinner is provided. So there's the registration. You just email Callan with the Nature Conservancy to sign up for that. And then we also have recordings from several of our webinars here. So this is also a good resource for past events. And then the other big event that we're planning now, we are hosting the Lands and Legacies Conference. In 2022, we hosted the Texas Coastal Prairie Conference, and we have grown because now we have a whole new initiative called the Texas Grasslands and Savannas Initiative. And this is extending our reach with our partners, and the funding is coming from NRCS, the Natural Resource Conservation Service, to help us establish conservation easements and create funding pipelines for landowners and land managers to do more habitat work on their lands through the Post Oak Savanna and up into the Blackland Prairie region. I don't even know. Yeah, we don't even have a map yet of the counties that are involved, but it's that whole Post Oak Savanna, Central Texas swath. So we're just launching this new initiative, which is even bigger than the Texas Coastal Prairie Initiative. So now that we have two initiatives going, the conference is going to be even bigger. So we've morphed the name from our tagline, Preserving Texas Lands and Legacies, to the name of the conference. So now we're hosting the Lands and Legacies Conference, and we plan to host that every 2 years. We're super excited about it, and we're hosting this one at George Ranch Historical Park. So save the date. It's October 24th and 25th this year. We don't have tickets for sale yet, but we will shortly have the sponsorship opportunities up on this page. So if your group is interested in sponsoring, we'll have those levels up. And if you're interested in volunteering or being a speaker at the conference, having your organization featured at the conference, please do email me. Because that's our big outreach program coming up, and we love to feature our partners. If you're doing exciting work in restoration, in ecotourism, and outreach, we're also going to cover green energy development, carbon storage, all sorts of topics. So this is going to be a great conference to come to. So that's my pitch. So now I'm going to stop share, and then let's see if it will. I'm not even seeing your PowerPoint as an option. That's weird. I'm gonna It'll let me. I'm going to share one PowerPoint slide before we get started. I'm just going to share the whole screen then. Yep. All right. So I'm going to bring this up and then I'm going to introduce our speakers. All right. So today our speakers are Dr. Megan Clayton and Dr. Anthony Falk. Dr. Megan Clayton, since 2010, has been an extension rangeland specialist for Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service and the Department of Rangeland, Wildlife, and Fisheries at Texas A&M. Megan's responsibilities as a rangeland specialist have her currently based at the Uvalde Research and Extension Center and include providing support for extension agents, specialists, clientele, and organizations through teaching, training, and providing technical expertise on the management of rangeland resources. Megan's current interests include blending wildlife habitat and livestock range management, small acreage management, UAV or drone research, brush management, and youth natural resource education. Megan's main area of responsibility includes the Uvalde Hill Country area. So thank you, Megan. Dr. Tony Falk. He is the Dan L. Duncan Endowed Director of the Texas Native Seed Project at the Caesar Kleberg Wildlife Research Institute at Texas A&M Kingsville. Tony came to Texas A&M Kingsville in 2008 to work on his master's project looking at restoring native grassland habitat in the lower Rio Grande Valley. After his master's, Tony transitioned into a full-time position with Texas Native Seeds, and while at Texas Native Seeds, he worked his way up to his current position and completed his PhD along the way. Pretty impressive. And through Tony's time with Texas Native Seeds, he has helped to restore tens of thousands of acres across our state. So we've got two really accomplished, impressive speakers here to educate us about native seeds and how we can become more informed in using them. And Tony, Megan, did you want to add anything on this slide while we have it up?
That's it. I guess if I was going to talk a little bit about the extension service that I work for, they are in the business of helping Texans. And I love that our mission is just to be of service to landowners and people of many walks of life. It's nice that all of our information is research-based. And so we do a lot of efforts in doing research projects, usually on private lands, in order to come up with solutions to issues that landowners are having. Our whole basis is that county extension agents are our local contacts, and then those county extension agents have specialists who support them in education or research needs if there's not the education to give. And so really proud to work for an organization that works for the people of Texas and does so much good. That's our email address for our main website. If you wanted to check out the different avenues of the Texas A&M service, it's of course a part of the larger Texas A&M system. We're in AgriLife, just like Texas A&M Forest Service, Texas A&M Research, or even the Texas Veterinary Medical Diagnostic Lab. Those are all under sort of the same umbrella. And then all of our publications and things can be found at that AgriLife Learn site, but we'll revisit that again at the end of our presentation.
Great. All right, thank you. So I'm going to stop share now. And then Megan, I think you were going to share next. Is that right?
Tony is going to kick us off with a little bit of an introduction about the online course that we've done and also more about Texas Native Seed.
All right.
Everybody get in the presentation mode there?
Looks good. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you everybody for joining us during your lunch break. As mentioned, I'm going to give just kind of a little bit of background on our Texas Native Seeds program, and then kind of get into kind of how to do some native restoration or native grassland restoration through seeding. So Texas Native Seeds, like so many other programs, is this big collaborative effort. We collaborate with everybody from our federal partners, the 3 plant materials centers in the state, U.S. Forest Service, state level partners, Texas A&M AgriLife, both research and extension, several universities throughout the state, and then private entities as well. Whether that's, our industry partners like the seed companies or private landowners throughout the state. Texas Native Seeds is split into 6 different project regions. Those project regions are loosely based off of ecoregions throughout the state. Within each project region, we have a center home base, so to speak, and several staff members within each of those project regions. Our mission at Texas Native Seeds is to develop and promote native plants for restoration and reclamation of habitats on private and public lands. What does that really look like on a day-to-day basis? Well, seed source development is really the heart of what we do. How we go about that process is first by identifying species of interest. The end goal of everything that we do is to have a commercial product that's available at large scales. We want to be able to develop native seed material that's possible to reseed tens or hundreds of thousands of acres across the entire state. So we work with interested landowners or interested parties in each region to define what those species of interest are. Once we have those defined, we get out and do the really fun part, and that is collecting seed from native populations throughout the area. We bring those back, evaluate them, and then develop those or grow those out before giving that seed to commercial growers. So everybody says, well, little blue stem is little blue stem, side oats is side oats. The example here on the picture, not root bristlegrass is not root bristlegrass. What you learn very quickly in these evaluations is that each of these different populations is very different. Once we've made at least 2 to 3 collections of a species of interest from each county, we start those in the greenhouse and then plan out these common garden studies at between 3 or 4 locations within a given region. You can see in the picture here, that population in the center of the screen, bright green color. Some of those others are more of a bluish color. Also, that population in the center has got a lot more seed production versus some of the other ones. What we're looking for in these evaluations is those populations that stand out near the top compared to the others in characteristics that are going to make them easily commercially produced. Once we've selected the top 3 to 5 populations that are the top performing in each of those regions, we go into a seed increase phase. Each of those populations is produced in isolation, so we maintain the genetic integrity of that original population, and then we use conventional agricultural techniques to produce as much seed as possible. What that looks like is we're using irrigation, mechanical cultivation. We've got an army of volunteers, undergraduate student workers to help hand hoe and keep these plots clean, herbicides, insecticides, all of those things that you'd use in a traditional agricultural setting just on native plants. With the end goal being getting that seed to a commercial grower and then being able to produce or have seed production fields of 250 acres or more so that there's reliable, large-scale material on the commercial market for anybody that wants to do restoration. So that's the seed development side of things, but that's only part of it. All of the effort that we put into that in this 7 to 10 year process between collection and commercial availability doesn't mean anything if a commercial grower can't actually sell the product. So the other part of that is this promotion thing. Through that, we do research into best management practices on how to establish native seed. That top picture, we're testing out 2 different common planting techniques, a native seed drill, and then a brilliant style seeder or a drop seeder. And then we host field days, educational days, get folks out, educate them on the individual species that we're working with, the specific names, and the details of all of that information. All of that has led us to partnering with Texas A&M AgriLife and Dr. Clayton to develop a native seeding certification course that's online. You may ask, why did we go through all the effort of doing that? Well, the reality of it is that successfully establishing native grassland habitat from seed can be really complicated. And because of that, the more information that you know, the better your chances of success. Additionally, if anybody's done a quick Google search of, reseeding native grasslands, there's a lot of information out there. The downside is that very little of it is really for the state of Texas. Texas being unique in that we're not really the East, we're not really the West, and so we don't get included in a lot of the other kind of large scale grassland restoration research projects that have historically been done. Additionally, with that, as you'll see as we get through and into our presentation a little bit, Texas is very diverse. Texas is very unique. Each property is unique. And so to really be successful, you need to have all of this information to be able to have the most accurate information available for your specific project. Add to that, modern landowners nowadays are information hogs. What I mean by that is if they're going to take on a project, they want to know as much information as is out there before getting into doing that. They're not just doing something on a whim. And then if you're in a situation where you're going to be hiring somebody to help you do your restoration or help doing native seeding, if your contractor has this certification, you can have some peace of mind that they have at least a good background into what they're doing. And it's not just, somebody down the street that decided they were going to pick up a seed drill and say, oh, I've done native restoration before. Through having this certification, you can have some peace of mind. So, not that I need to spend a lot of time on this topic for this group, but where our online certification process really starts is by talking about why native plants are important. The short answer to that is they can do whatever you want them to do, as a matter of fact. They provide habitat for our grassland birds, pollinators, diversity in general. They serve as excellent forage. They're great for erosion control, water infiltration, you name it, natives can do it. But kind of a bit more into the details of things. Our online course gets into some of the very basic details on plant characteristics and plant biology. You may wonder why you need some of these things. If anybody's ever tried to look at doing plant identification using a plant key, it looks like they are speaking their own language. They're often words that you may have never seen before. You start to look them up and realize that several of them may seemingly describe the same thing. For example, florets and spikelets and flowers can all be describing reproductive strategies of different plants. How that information is used for somebody looking to do native plant restoration is, again, that the more information you know, the better off you'll be able to do things like develop diverse seed mixes and really understand what's going on in your restoration. Additionally, you can do really cool things like show off to your neighbors and pull a leaf off of, say, a yellow Indian grass that doesn't have a seed head on it and say, look at these ligules. This is a really a key characteristic in identifying Indian grass. It's going to be something your neighbor is most likely not going to know, and you sound really smart by using the correct terminology. Additionally, things can get confusing as you get into the details. So, little blue stem picture there. We all understand that that's a grass. It's also a monocot. Two different terms, both describing grasses. Grasses are dominant part of our plant communities on our coastal prairies and throughout much of the Texas. Grasses are critical because they provide structure and cover. They're the things that our grassland birds are nesting in, fawns are using to escape or are used for cover, and they provide lots of variation and height as well. Additionally, the structure of grasses and the way they grow make them able to be grazed. So they're providing our key forages for our livestock throughout the state. We see the same thing in flowers or forbs, also known as dicots. These are the species that have lots of diversity into our native grasslands. They provide food for absolutely everything. They make up huge parts of diets of deer, cattle. Seeds are eaten by all kinds of birds. They provide pollen for our pollinators. And additionally, in certain cases, they can even be dominant on a lot of communities. I'm sure lots of us have seen situations where a grassland community has been disturbed in some sense, and lo and behold, what follows is a sea of croton, doveweed, sunflowers, and things like that, and those communities can hold fast for a number of years. Again, looking into how this is important, we have all of these different terms that can describe plants. A lot of them can be overlapping and a lot of them can all be used for the same thing. So some other things that you'll hear often is a plant will be described by where its origin is. Is it native? Is it not native? Which is very different than how it acts and reacts with other plants, which goes towards its invasibility. Some plants are described by their successional stage. Are they early, mid, or late successional stage? And understanding where each plant fits will help in developing different seed mixes. They'll also be split into different seasons of growth or their photosynthetic pathways and their lifespans. Are they annuals or perennials? All of these details help in the restoration process and are way more than we could ever cover in an hour presentation. And so that's a big part of the reason that we've developed this course and the details that are really embedded in it. As I mentioned, Texas is a hugely diverse state. Everything from coastal prairies, mountains out west, brushlands of South Texas, pine trees of far east Texas, and then the shortgrass prairies of the high plains. But how is it so diverse? Or how is that diversity created? A large part of it is because of the diversity in rainfall across the state. Texas being the size that it is and located where it's at, we go from everything from over 50 inches of rainfall in the far southeast corner of the state, under 10 inches on the far west side of the state, and everything in between. And that diversity in rainfall equates to diversity in landscapes and habitats. Couple that with the diversities of soils. When it comes to soils, I look at it as, can it grow plants or can it not grow plants? That is one part of this that I will full well admit that I am not familiar with. Thankfully, we've partnered with some really great people at Texas A&M and College Station to be able to describe soils. This is a map of just coarse soils. If we were going to put all of the details in there, you wouldn't be able to tell what anything really was. This is my interpretation of soils. That picture on the top left of that gray, crusty soil, I know it's really salty by the way it looks, and it's going to be difficult for me to grow plants in. There is way more information we can gain from that. And that's where we've been able to turn to experts in this course and really be able to help dive into that. Again, that picture on the bottom right-hand corner there, that's a subsoil brought up to build that frac tank dam. Again, I understand that there are issues there, but I don't understand the chemistry, so we've got the experts to help us. When we put soils and water together, we're able to develop ecoregions. The state split into 10 ecoregions, and understanding these help us to be able to understand where we can establish grasslands, the different species and varieties that are are best adapted to those regions, and even the ratios of grasses to forbs, or maybe we shouldn't even be looking at putting grasslands in some areas because they should be, brushy areas or something along those lines. Now, it's easy to understand that different ecoregions have different plant communities, but what's really interesting is the different regions throughout the states can have the same individual species. For example, little bluestem, which is found South Texas, shown there in the top left on the Texas sand sheet, out in the Davis Mountains, post oak savannas, blackland prairies. Little bluestems found everywhere, but they're all very different. And so understanding that and understanding how the different varieties of little bluestem that are available fit into those different habitats can really be a big difference in whether you have a successful restoration planting or not. So understanding basic plant biology, understanding the variabilities in across Texas in habitats, understanding soils, all of that kind of basic information is really needed to be able to successfully develop a native seed mix. And that's the next part of this online seed certification course, is a whole section dedicated to seed selection. Basically, what we're looking at here is what species and then what type of material are we going to be using. So to determine what species, there's several different options out there that you can look to be able to help. One readily available one, or a couple of readily available ones, is the NRCS's web soil survey tool that's available online. Our course goes through and walks you through how to use this tool, how to develop areas of interest, and where to find the information that's useful. Additionally, another free online tool to help to select what species is a seed mix map that we've developed on our Texas Native Seeds website that breaks down the different regions, ecoregions, and soil types within each of those regions. So both of those are free online tools that this course will walk you through how to use to help be able to start to define what species you want to include in your seed mix. Other places, if you're a plant nerd and like to go out and identify things, dig into keys, roadsides are an excellent place to be able to find some native habitat that has not been necessarily disturbed. Back roads are an excellent place to be able to find some of these habitats. And so if you're good with your plant identification, you can go down the road and find a place, maybe close to your restoration site, has similar soils, and see what native plants are growing there to be able to start to refine what species you're going to plant. Another option is to ask an expert. There's a lot of folks out there who have experience, have been on a lot of different properties, and know the species that should be in certain areas. Those include folks from the NRCS, or Natural Resource Conservation Service, Texas Parks and Wildlife, TPWD. Commercial seed dealers are another excellent source of information for you, as well as anybody within our Texas Native Seed staff, or as Dr. Clayton had mentioned, Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service. Once we've decided what species we're going to be included in the mix, we need to decide what type of material we're going to be able to get some of those species in. Generally speaking, there's three types of species available commercially. The first one I'm going to talk about falls under a lot of different names: wild harvest, native, variety not stated, VNS, any or all of those names, or if it's just sold as Cytos grama and doesn't have anything else associated with it. All of that material is going to fall under the same category. Where that material originates from is either somebody going out and harvesting it in situ from a prairie remnant, or they've made a collection of that and turned it into a commercial grower, and that commercial grower has bulked it up from there. All of that material is coming from a single source. What that means is that it's going to have only the genetics of that individual population. So they're somewhat limited. Along with that, that means that the area of use of that population is going to be limited as well. It's only going to be adapted to the climate and the soils where that population originated from. Now, what that means is for a lot of areas that have not had a lot of plant development, some of these wild harvest or native populations are going to be the best material for a given restoration. Particularly if, you know, I know there's a lot of wild or native material harvested from the Outwaters prairie chicken sites. If you're a property owner that lives close to that site, that's excellent material for you to use for your restoration. The downsides of that material is that it may or may not have a seed test that goes along with it that gives you the information on seed quality or really the actual seed quantity in that bag. Within our course, it really dives into the differences in this material. It explains what I'm talking about in much more detail and what a seed test is. Now, the other part of this is that because a lot of this material comes from wild harvest or comes from native populations in the field, it's only going to be the source for a lot of, you know, forbs, some of these rare species and things like that. Another source of material that's out there is a germplasm. These things you will hear named, and they will almost always have the name germplasm in the name as it's being sold. Example of that would be Coastal Plains germplasm little blue stem. Germplasms are typically made up of multiple source populations, sometimes up to 15 or 20 source populations. The benefits of that are you're getting all of the genetic material from each one of those populations. So there's a lot of genetic material there, which makes those releases capable of adapting to things like climate change or variabilities in soil. Additionally, they're going to be able to be used across very broad areas because those populations came from different soils and different climates originally. They've also had scientific testing. All of the releases done from our Texas Native Seeds program are germplasm releases. And as I kind of stated earlier in the presentation, you know, we have 3 to 5 years worth of data, performance data on each of the populations we've selected. Now, all germplasm releases are going to be done by universities, plant material centers, or other programs such as ours. And we don't have, none of those programs have the capability of doing large scale commercial production. So we turn that material over to commercial seed producers, making it more readily available at larger scales. Additionally, because it's commercially produced, it's more likely, or in a lot of cases is even required, to have seed tests for quality and cleanliness. The downside being not all species are going to be suitable for this model. There's a lot of species that, you know, we've looked at internally within Texas Native Seeds as a program that just cannot be commercially produced for a number of different reasons. And so it's just never going to fit that kind of model. The third type of native seed that's available is a cultivar. Cultivars are the traditional way of making native plant releases. A lot of times as you see these releases on the commercial market, they're going to have an individual name. You know, an example of that is Haskell side oats grama. It doesn't have the germplasm included in the name and will be included in, the name will be in parentheses a lot of times. Cultivars were developed historically for a very specific use. Because of that, they have repeatable genetics from one generation to the next. And to get that, a lot of times in native plants, they've been selected down to individual plants, which if we were concerned about the amount of genetic material available from a wild harvest in a single population, now we're down all the way to an individual plant. So we have very limited genetics. The flip side of that is because they've been selected for that specific use, they work very, very well for that use and in those intended areas of use. They do sometimes have the misconception that you can create super plants from cultivars because they have been so highly selected. Just like germplasm, cultivars are going to be commercially produced and have the associated tests to go with their quality and cleanliness to go with those. So once you've decided how you're going to develop that seed mix and how that's going to be constituted, how do we get ready to do seedbed prep? Well, this is what we're looking for on native seeding for an ideal seed prep. We want something that's relatively uniform, firm, and weed-free. As you can see, as that seed drills run across that, it's leaving very minor indentations from where those different discs and coulters are being planted. Conversely, this is a bad seed bed. This seed bed is going to be way too fluffy. What we traditionally tell people that they seems to resonate with most folks is when you want a seed bed that you can walk across in your flip-flops and not get dirt between your flip-flops and your toes. If you're walking across that and really sinking in, it's going to be way too fluffy to really be effective or to be successful in doing native seeding restoration. So the hard thing about native seedbed or seedbed prep is that there is no prescription. Each property is different. Each project is different. Everybody has a different starting point and a different end goal. So the biggest kind of take home can give you in a truncated presentation like this is to start the process early. Start thinking about things on what do I want to have for an end goal? What do I currently have to work with as far as the plant community that's there and the equipment that I have available to me. Some options that are out there and ways to attain that perfect seedbed. Fire is an excellent tool. It's an excellent way and a very cost-effective way to remove above ground vegetation to be able to start to work that soil. Additionally, there's a lot of mechanical techniques out there, whether that's, if we've got heavy tree cover, there's grubbing, there's root plowing, there's chaining, there's all sorts of different things that you can be able to use. Additionally, discs and cultivators and things like that. Herbicides. Well, I know herbicides can, in the media, have a bad rep. They're an excellent tool for us, and a lot of times are one of the really only tools available to us to be able to cost effectively treat large acreages. And then we have to remember that a lot of this stuff takes time and that there's no substitute for rain. As we're trying to develop things to, say, convert from Bermuda grass to native grasslands, we need a series of treatments with subsequent rains to ensure that we can get all of that non-native Bermuda grass out of there before we come back in with native seed. Our online course takes the time to walk people through a number of different scenarios and different starting points, different equipment availabilities to be able to give people some context and some examples of how to get from point A to point B and really be successful with native reseeding. Once we've started to work through that native seed bed and get everything ready to go, the next part of this is when to put the seed out. I kind of jokingly say whenever the ground is ready to go is a good time to do it. We've seen it a lot of times in South Texas with as variable as our weather is. You're better off to go ahead if you've got that seed bed prepped and ready to go. Say you had a pipeline come through, instead of waiting, go ahead and plant your native seed when it's available. If you have the ability to be able to plant things, we've seen our best success between mid-August and the end of October, leaning towards the front end of that. A lot of folks would tell you they remember, hey, we had a good dove season lined up. I had a good dove hole ready to go. And then it rained and seemed to mess that up. We want to have that seed in the ground before those fall rains. Same thing in the spring. That changes as we move into West Texas, as we get more monsoonal rainfall periods. So we want to get in before those monsoonal rains. For the rest of Texas, spring seems to be the priority over fall. So having those in March, the beginning of March, and getting out, having that seed ready to go before our spring rains come. With that, thank you for giving me the chance to present today. I really appreciate it. Here is my contact information. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to email or call with any of those questions. And with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Clayton.
Thank you, Dr. Falk. Dr. Clayton, before you start, I just want to let everybody know, if you want to go ahead and drop questions in the chat, we'll have a short portion at the end to go through those.
Great. All right. Well, thanks, Dr. Falk. We are ready to roll into planting methods and post-planting management. So we've gone through the whole grilling cycle of figuring out what seeds you want to plant, getting your planting right, getting that in the ground. What are you going to get it in the ground with? So we cover 4 different types of planting methods. One being the native seed drill, which I think is commonly known, maybe less likely found. It's very difficult sometimes to get your hands on a native seed drill, but we're trying to argue it is way better than using a traditional drill, especially if you have a high diversity of seeds in your mix. So any native seed drill is going to have a fluffy or a chaffy seed box and a hard seed box, which is incredibly important for making sure you get the right amount of seed out and then it's calibrated more directly. The other huge benefit of a native seed drill is that it has different depth bands that can be adjusted to make sure that you're not going too deep, because we know that our native seeds are extremely tiny, especially if you compare that to something like a corn kernel. These seeds need to be really close to the soil surface. In fact, they just need really good seed to soil surface in order to germinate in most cases. So native seed drill is obviously ideal, but there are some scenarios such as rough terrain or rock where native seed drills may not be so practical. And we've actually done some research where we used several different planting types, and broadcast seeding is not a worse choice in all cases. In fact, broadcast seeding can be incredibly effective. That's where you're slinging out that seed, and then oftentimes, if you're able to, is to pack that seed behind it to get that good seed to soil contact. So you're not just feeding the birds with your slinging seed. The next one is a drop seeder. I think a drop seeder is probably a lesser known planting technique, at least it definitely is for me. But a drop seeder is just a hybrid. So we're talking about a machine that has multiple seed boxes like a native seed drill would, but it's dropping the seed in, followed by a cultipacker that's built into the machine. And we'll look at a picture of that in just a second. And our last planting technique would be with a hydroseeder. Hydroseeding you've probably seen on the side of the highway, if nothing else, where they spray out that seed mix in a slurry, and it usually is colored. That slurry not only waters your seed, but that mulch that goes out with it is helping to hold the seed, especially on erosion-prone lands. So hydroseeding is usually really limited to spaces to where we know that we're going to have erosion issues, or there's something really difficult about that planting scenario that makes you feel like you need to use that, and usually just in a small space. Think about all that water being sprayed out. You got to have a good water source nearby. A lot of things go behind trying to get a hydroseeder out, and it's quite expensive. So here's a picture of just a classic small native seed drill. It's got multiple boxes here on the top for your different types of seeds. There are chances where you could take a fluffy or a chaffy seed and coat that with a type of talc. Sometimes it's kind of a bluish color, and then it can be put out with your hard seeds. But if you've got a true mix or a true diversity of plants going on, you probably have quite a few chaffy seeds that you would benefit from putting in a separate box to make sure that they're dropping at the correct rate. Otherwise, as you've seen, when you mix up something that's light and fluffy with something that's hard and heavy, you shake that up and eventually the hard stuff's going to go to the bottom. And so you're going to be seeding a whole lot of your hard seeds, and your fluffy seeds may come out much later. This is an example of a classic slinger broadcaster. It's slinging that seed out. They are calibrated. It's just harder to be perfect with the calibration, and sort of the same issue. So you start to mix those different types of seeds together, and they're going down into that broadcaster, and they may not go out perfect. So that's why sometimes they kind of get put second in the lineup of preferences of planting methods, although it is highly effective. You don't even necessarily need a fancy piece of equipment to do broadcast seeding. You could just throw it out and stomp it with your foot. That is broadcasting and seed to soil contact when you pop your foot down. So sometimes we think about things as being really intricate and having a lot of equipment needs, and that's not always the case if you're planting a very small area. This is an example of a drop seeder, which is kind of cool. It's got the different boxes on top, but this is your little cultipacker here at the bottom where it's kind of running over the ground. A little bit of aeration, if you will. I'm dropping that seed into it, and then it's running it over to make sure it gets good seed to soil contact and barely buried, if at all, underneath that soil. And then finally, this is an example of our hydro seeder, where they will spray out that slurry mix with the mulch and the water, and of course your seed. It holds that onto very steep slopes where you might want to get good plant coverage eventually. But again, very expensive, and this is a much lesser used method. So after we plant, cannot stress enough, patience, patience, patience. So many times people say that they planted and it was a complete failure, but it hasn't even been 2 years. And so sometimes those plants have not come up yet, but we have to remember that as Tony was talking about, when you're putting together a seed mix, you want quite a bit of diversity, and that includes different successional stages. So you're going to have your early plants, those that are going to come up first thing, usually pretty weedy species. You'll have mid-stage successional species that'll start to come in, and finally your late successional species. I always get a kick out of it when I tell people, what plants do you want to see? They're like, oh, big blue stem, yellow Indian grass. How about, little Eastern Gama grass? I'm like, you're naming everything that's a very late successional species. So if you were to go with your plan A and plant only native grasses, you may see some delay in them coming up. And oftentimes these early to mid successional species are what's holding that soil, creating the right environment for those later successional species to then come up and thrive. So I really love the idea of planting a mix and them supporting each other just like they normally would in a native plant community. We say defer grazing from 1 to 3 years. Well, that is a really big span, either 1 year of no cattle on there or livestock on there, or 3 years. But everything, of course, depends on the weather. And if you get the right conditions to where your plants come up and they get established, I have seen examples to where you could, if you wanted to, graze those plants the following grazing season. But most of the time, it's going to take some years to get establishment in order for those plants to grow good root system and to be healthy enough to take that grazing and then come back from the reserves that they've had time to put underneath the ground. We also suggest delaying prescribed fire for at least 2 years. That again is to maintain healthy root systems, to allow them to grow, to allow that plant to have a good healthy start before that fire comes through. Because although our plants are very adapted to fire, our native plants, they still need time once established to really sink their roots in and make sure that they're holding well. Also, you want to make sure that you give all of those plants equal chance to come up. And there is some dormancy that's built into your seed. Sometimes people are scared of dormancy in seed, but I actually think of dormancy as our plan B. So if we put all our seeds out and those seeds that were dormant in the beginning come up later on, then when conditions are better, then they've actually sort of saved your planting. So I'm never scared of a little dormancy. And you definitely want to give them the time to make that comeback. And then, of course, maintaining areas free of brush or invasive plants, such as invasive grasses like King Ranch bluestem or Klein grass or guinea grass, whatever you have in the area. Incredibly helpful for that plant community that you're trying to get established, not only to make sure you do your prior planning and your prep to make sure that those seed beds were as clean as possible when you did plant, but never fails, you're going to have some things come up that you did not intend to be there, and taking care of those individually when they first come up would be your best game plan. So what are your options? And we're going to talk first about chemical, but also a little bit about mechanical options when things come up that you're not really excited about seeing. We know that we could, with glyphosate, which is also known by the trade name Roundup, spot spray a high rate of a broad spectrum herbicide individually on the plants that you're wanting to take out of that plant community. We also know that sometimes there's an area that may have not got proper prep, or it had some plants move in from a nearby field that become a little bit of a problematic area. And it may be best to actually take out that small corner to eliminate those plants from moving further into your planted field. So we call that kind of a sacrifice area. That may be necessary, but again, that's why we do our diligent work in preparing that seed bed before we even put the seeds in the ground. If you're only planting native grasses, and again, I just went on this long tangent about why I love planting a diverse mix of grasses and forbs, early, mid, and late successional species. But if you really only want grasses in your field, you could apply an herbicide that has 2,4-D as an active ingredient. And that specific chemical works on broadleaf plants. And so it will not impact your grasses as long as your grasses have time to actually grow a little bit. So a gauge would be to allow them to grow about 6 inches tall and have at least 4 or 5 true leaves developed on the grass before you apply the herbicide, because even though the herbicide might not kill it, an herbicide of any type could stunt grasses in that situation. So again, I love that grasses grow more like in bunches. Native grasses do. And then on the inner spaces in between those grass clumps is the ideal place for forbs to grow. So ideally you're planting both, but if you just wanted to plant grasses, it does open up a little bit more opportunity for follow-up treatments with 2,4-D. Additionally, things that you want to keep in mind is that these different successional stages may create sort of an ugly look in the beginning, or a very weedy look to your property. Hang in there, because the other species will follow eventually, or hopefully will follow eventually. Sometimes people call and they say, I have this large forb that has grown, or weed, that's typically what they say, over the whole area, and I'm going to mow it down. Well, if it is keeping the sunlight from reaching those seeds and germinating the other plants underneath, then by all means, that might be your best option, is to mow it down, especially before it goes to seed. But sometimes if you look underneath the larger forbs, you want to make sure that they're not actually acting as a nurse plant. So they may be keeping the harsh sun from burning up the newly germinated seeds, or the newly germinated plants. So you may actually find that you have more of your planted seeds coming up underneath these big weeds than not. And so always be sure to scout to kind of assess the entire situation before you pull the trigger on any of these follow-up treatments. So here's just an example. This is a very sandy soil in this picture at planting. And this over here on the right at the top is the fall, the year after planting. So you can see what I mean, a little bit weedy. So if you're intending to get good coverage, you may start to feel disappointed, but fall 2 years after planting, you can see that some other species have started to come in. It looks like there was some brush that encroached that probably needed to be treated, likely with a cut stump method, where you would cut off that plant as low and as flat to the ground as possible and just spray the remaining stump or any remaining stem. And that should take care of that plant. Alternatively, if you only have small seedling brush coming up, you could just spray the stem of that plant and then leave that skeleton for 1 full year, and that plant will eventually die. So those are some options as opposed to just doing leaf sprays, which are of course always an option as well on brush, but looks like they've taken out those few brush plants that did pop back up. And the field looks very different after 3 years of planting. So patience, 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 and recognize that what you're doing is trying to recreate an ecological process, and nothing in our nature environment happens quickly. Things are processed, and you're going to see different things come up with different weather conditions over those several years. We want to end, we keep talking or alluding to this online native seeding course, and that's just because we're aware that though we can go through all the steps with you here during this lunch hour, we don't have the ability to go in as much detail as we did in the online course. So for those that are interested, what we've done is we created a course that has 9 different modules, and you've heard from a little bit of each of those modules today. We did click-through videos, we did interactive activities, and supplemental publications that you can download throughout the course that might speak to Dr. Falk and I's ability to get bored very quickly. So we're trying to hold your attention by moving things very differently through the course. Our first module is just simply why natives are important. I think there's a lot of background for people to understand about the role of non-native plants and how they were introduced into our environment, and understand that, you know, if, like it says on this example screen, all non-native plants aren't necessarily invasive or considered invasive, but they have the potential to because they did not naturally occur in our environment. The second module is on plant characteristics, and as Dr. Falk pointed out earlier, we not only talk about plant parts, monocots, dicots, but also the successional stages and how you can expect for your new planting to evolve, because we are trying to mimic how it normally would in nature. The third module is fantastic, and she would kill me if she saw that I did a screen capture and her eyes were closed. But Dr. Julie Howe is a soils professor at Texas A&M, and she did a fantastic job of adapting her typical Soils 101 class to a very short segment that's giving you the basic lowdown on what different soils mean, the color of soils, you know, darker soils have more organic matter, how we can tell a lot from soils, and also how that applies to their past use and how you now want to use that. So we just felt like including a little bit more soil knowledge would be important. I personally, and as an undergrad, did not understand how to apply the information about plants that I was learning to soils. I got a not so glamorous grade in that course, but later it really clicked how important soils were, because that's dictating what can ever grow on that property. The fourth module is about the diversity of Texas. And though we know that the rainfall gradients across the state and the temperatures and frost-free days, everything's very different in our state, which is probably why we love it. You never get bored. You can always travel to a new region. But we're also talking about these soil and climate impacts and trying to apply that to how it's going to impact your planting and why there are certain nuances you might want to consider depending on where you are. Module 5 is about seed selection, with Dr. Falk went through a drop in the bucket on picking seeds. Of course, there's different types of seeds available, and it's important to understand the differences. Oftentimes, we have some fantastic commercial suppliers of native seed in Texas, and they have pre-mixed native seed plantings or seed mixes. That was the word I was looking for. They have native seed mixes that they've already put together, but they can't guarantee it's going to be perfect for your place and your place way over here and your place way over here. They just did their best to find some that kind of have some broad reach to where it would do well on quite a few places. But there may be some additional things that you would want to buy to add to that mixture to make it specially yours. And so it's very important, I think, that you understand what did used to grow on your soils and how you might be able to adapt those typical seed mixes to be best for you. And then, of course, seedbed prep, incredibly important. I'd say a lot of the times when something fails or a planting fails, you either didn't get rain or you didn't prep very well. So seedbed prep's very important. And I think some of us get a little bit shy about the different processes that might go into prepping a piece of property for planting, or just feel a little bit inadequate as far as the different types of machinery that might be available either for rent or to hire out if you need something done on a property. And so we kind of go through all the different types of equipment, the chemical options that people might be facing when they're trying to decide how to best clean up that property. The seventh module is on ideal planting times. And this is a great example of how we've attached a lot of different publications that may be very useful for supplemental reading and for reference later on to try to determine what would be best for you. In this example, we're talking about cover crops, because sometimes if you're having to plant outside of an ideal window, you might benefit from adding in a cover crop to at least hold that soil temporarily before your natives can then come up. The eighth module, I'm getting to the end, there's only 9, planting methods and equipment. We compare all of the planting methods that I just went through with you, pros and cons of each. And we even talk a little bit about where you might find things like a native seed drill. How do you get your hands on one of those? And then in the 9th module, post-planting management, we're talking about not only having patience, because we don't need a whole module to tell you to have patience, but also some site-specific things that you might want to think about that others who have done a lot of plantings have really found to be problematic, and that might help you to miss those hurdles while you're going through your process. So again, the native seeding certification course was designed initially to get more information all in one place for Texas landowners who were planting, and also for those who commercially plant, so that we too, as state agencies, we could start to tell people who have been through the course that are also sort of certified to plant natives, because at least they have heard some of the information that's science-based in the past. The course does cost $100. You work at your own pace, so it's not like Tony or I are lecturing you or sending you emails every week, but you have 1 year to complete the course to get through all of the material, and then you'll get a certificate when you finish the test at the end. So this is what agrilifelearn.tamu.edu, so that's TAMU. Just learned that TAMU, that's the Chinese website that sells really cheap stuff. So not TAMU, but TAMU, like Texas A&M University.edu. And this is also a QR code. If you want to hold your phone over that, it should pull up the website for you to find the AgriLife Learn where that is. But if you just go to agrilifelearn.tamu.edu, you'll just simply go up here to the search box. The easiest thing is just to type native seeding into that, and it's the first thing that'll pop up. But of course, if you have any questions, you do not have to take our course to get questions answered. Dr. Falk and I are more than happy to chat with you, or email back and forth, or you can always ask for help with either web soil survey or the Texas Native Seeds seed selector tool that might be able to point you in the right direction for what you might start to look for depending on where you're trying to do a replanting. So there's all of our information. I hope you do reach out to myself or Dr. Falk in the future. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Daniel.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Clayton. And thank you again to Dr. Falk as well. And just wanted to give everybody an opportunity to, if you have questions, to throw them into the chat. And you can also unmute yourself as well.
Y'all are too easy.
Fighting.
Oh,
I was going to say, Dr. Clayton, and I'm sorry, I didn't get the other presenter. Thank you so much. This was just very informational, and I am
Shannon.
definitely signing up.
Oh, good. Well, it's
Appreciate
nice
you
to
guys.
see you on here, Shannon. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Take care.
Mhm.
I have a question, please.
Sure, Cynthia.
If you have a project started, but there's areas that maybe, need reseeding because you've treated something invasive, what's the best way to reseed? Which of those methods? I mean, would it be better to do it by hand and then just stomp on it, or is there something
How
else?
big of an area are you talking about?
Probably a lot of different smaller areas, just, where you're having trouble.
Actually, if it's a lot of little small places, you could just hand sling that seed back out. Especially if you see that some of your plants did not establish as well in some area and you want to try reseeding. Perhaps there was something wrong when the seed was coming out and it wasn't planted exactly perfect, because it's very difficult, as you can imagine. I should have brought my bags of seed that are up there. They are so different in size and shape. And so there's a lot of reasons that could happen, but definitely the old throw and stomp method, or
Okay.
and get some kids as volunteers. They're very good at stomping, I've found.
Okay.
That's a great way to just start to get some of those spaces filled in. There are broadcast seeders. There's even a handheld broadcast seeders. Do I think you need those? No. Just depends on how large your area is and how daunting it is to tackle on your own at a little bit at a time.
And is it worthwhile throwing in forbs like the Indian blanket to hold that space, because this native seeds won't be coming for a while?
I like the idea of adding in forbs. Not only are they pretty, but those forbs, annual weeds are wildflowers, as we like to call them, for part of the year. And then I get a lot of calls about, how do I get rid of these weeds? I'm like, hey, you liked those a few months ago, but these weeds create an enormous amount of seed. That's their ecological place. They create a lot of seed. They hold the soil steady. And most of the time, if there's nothing established there that's going to come up, I encourage people not to treat their weeds, because those weeds are serving their purpose. And so I always encourage adding in forbs into the mix. And there's a lot of beautiful perennial forbs that you would also want to consider adding in that will also establish quite readily. And they're very beneficial for our pollinators and for wildlife too. And people discount that livestock eat a lot of forbs. And so they're not just a wildlife or a pollinator thing. They're an everybody thing. So I tend to lean towards it.
I'm sorry, can you tell me a couple that you recommend?
Well, it's going to depend on where you are in your place, but if you want to shoot me an email, I will get you a
Okay.
couple.
All right.
There's a lot of perennial forbs that people have available for purchase. Many good commercial seed dealers here.
Thank you.
I'm going to put my email in, but y'all go ahead and ask more questions.
Hi, Dr. Clayton. This is Wanda. And I'm just getting started in learning. How do you get started to know what you have on your property? I mean, I see some things like thoroughwort. I don't know. It's kind of cool, but is it right? Is it native to my area? Is it what I really need? How do I get started to find out what I need to get rid of and what I need to encourage while I'm kind of getting the seed bed idea going?
Sure, that's a great question. What is the main goal for your property?
I have 10 acres. I'm probably going to rewild about 8 acres of it right now.
Okay.
And that's the goal. I don't know if I'll do that in phases or all in one thing, but I've got Bermuda on a lot. I have those typical things, but I want to bring back birds. I want, I want to bring back that native prairie. I'm in the post oak savanna, and I'm missing the pines because someone took them out of my property, but they're all around me. But I have the oaks, but I want that mixed grasses forbs to bring in. So I need to know, how do you get rid of the Bermuda? Can I just do that on part of it? That's what I'm trying to do, is try to figure out what do I need to get rid of and what do I need to bring in and how to do that.
That is an excellent question. So, of course, I've offered, we can help you with web soil survey to see what normally grows on your place. We can help you with identifying seeds that are available commercially, but you have some free resources available to you in your region. If you're interested in managing for birds, Texas Parks and Wildlife is an excellent reach. If you just type in Texas Parks and Wildlife, find your biologist, there's a page that'll take you right to who's your county biologist, and they will come out and visit free technical service on your property. Another place you could seek out is, of course, your county extension agent. They vary in ability to identify plants, but they all have support from range specialists or forage specialists in the area. And so definitely they could come out and help you walk through your property and give you opinions on that. And of course, the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service is another technical guidance opportunity to where they can also offer some suggestions. They can even help you if you wanted to make a natural tank or waterway. They can do a lot of things through their agency as well. So lots of free services for you too, that you can start to gather different opinions on what to do with your property. Dr. Falk, actually, if you wanted to reach out to him later, he had to move on to another meeting, but he did his entire PhD on changing Bermuda grass into natives. And so he would have a lot of insight into what you're looking for as far as doing that, because that is a really tough move to go from something with runners like a Bermuda grass and to get natives to establish around it.
Okay. And then I know you deal a lot with rangelands and stuff, because I've heard you speak several times. You're always very informative. But I live very rural, but I have a county road that runs in front of my house, and I got some beautiful forbs started, bee balm, Indian blanket, all of that. And just when the seeds, and it was all I could do to keep my husband from mowing. I haven't converted him completely. Just when the seeds were like starting to ripen, the county came and mowed it. Any tips? Any tips for stopping that? Do I have a right to put up a sign, or do you know the answers to this? Do I have a right to put up a sign, wildflower area, no mowing, and then pull the signs when they can mow?
So that's tricky, right? Because they own it. But I would say that the key there is communication. A whole lot can be diverted by talking to someone ahead of time. Like, tell them that you're putting out seed and that, you're trying to beautify the side of the road, and figure out what their schedule is and how y'all might be able to work together to maybe delay some of that mowing activity. I completely understand. I am very interested in management of King Ranch bluestem, and the mowing on the side of the road is not helpful in spreading the seed, because even if a landowner put forth the effort to kill the area in front of their property and replant in a native mix that TxDOT is agreeable to, once that mower comes through, it's going to have more of those invasive seeds on it and be dropping it while they're mowing through the whole side of the road. So there's some complications in the way that they have to deal with things, because they have a whole lot to take care of, and them trying to accommodate landowners and their requests. But I really feel like every time I've talked to TxDOT, and I have friends who work for TxDOT, every time I've talked to them, they've been very agreeable in explaining to me the process that they have to go through and what their charge is and how we might be able to work together to make that happen.
Okay, so you're saying I need to reach out to figure out who the county person is in charge of making those schedules happen for mowing.
I do. Just so like, here's my conundrum. What do you suggest? And I doubt they're going to say never plant anything nice. Like, we don't want it to look good. I think that's the best way, I think, is to be proactive and communicate with people, because a lot of times they're just not in the know. And there may be other landowners who also want to do that too. The other thing is, if you get together a group of people in your area, maybe a gardening club or Texas Master Naturalists group, you could have probably a bigger impact by doing widespread projects in conjunction with your county, so that your county also looks good. Just a couple suggestions there.
Oh, thank you. And I saw a chat come through WHF. Someone suggested them as a free resource. What is that? Something.
So Wildlife Habitat Federation is a fantastic resource. Now, I don't know that they're free, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I'm not sure that that's a free resource. But they do work in a certain area, and if you're within that, I'm sure they'd be more than happy.
Skylar Ray here. I am a conservationist with Wildlife Habitat
Thank
Federation.
you.
We do provide technical guidance at no cost to landowners.
Okay.
And we are across the state now of Texas. So definitely please go to our website and reach out to us, and we can get one of the conservationists near you to come out and perform a site visit, and we can get you started with the habitat management plan and help get your project going if you'd like to do so.
Fantastic. And how are y'all funded, Skylar?
Well, we are funded right now statewide by NRCS. So
Okay.
we recently did get a grant through them to be able to provide technical guidance at no cost to the landowners through that grant. But we also do work with the Texas Coastal Prairie Initiative as well. So we help planning anywhere within their counties that they do the TCPI. We will help planning with that as well. And we'll also be helping with the new initiative that they're working on, the Texas Grassland Savanna Initiative. So
fantastic. Thank you. And thank you for speaking up.
Yes, thank you.
All right. Yes. Contact Skylar and her team. Anybody else?
My name's Kate Zamora. I'm on the board of Harris County Med 127, and we are installing a bunch of new trails, and we're trying to go with all native plants. We're going to be extending bioswales that Harris County Flood Control installed as kind of a temporary project, hopefully along the whole length of our trails. But we have two large detention basins that right now are just very ugly detention basins with grass, and that's it. And we're wondering if it would be feasible to turn those into native prairie, with knowing that they will still flood in heavy rain events.
That is a good question. So there are plants that are more adapted for those wetland type environments, or maybe not obligate wetlands, but occasional flooding. Most definitely. And in fact, I feel like, I wish she was on here, I feel like Dr. Falk is working on some projects in the Houston area similarly related. So shoot us an email and let's make sure we get you in contact with somebody who does work in those environments where you may occasionally have flooding.
That would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, there's a lot of plants that can withstand that. They're made for that. Anybody else?
I have a question. If you cannot get the land to bare ground, which obviously is the best, if you have other plants you've been planting in an area, and this is I'm working with the city park, and what is the best thing to do there? We have planted plants and we have distributed seeds, but it isn't all reaching bare ground.
Okay, so you brought up a great thing that I don't even know if we touched on that today. Sometimes you just want to add diversity. It's not that you want to take out everything that's already there. A lot of great reasons to just add some seeds to the mix. If you're having trouble getting them to the ground, we suggest a few things. If the plants that are there are pretty well established and you're able, it's a park. So I'm picturing two different things, kind of a naturey park or more of a city park, but you could do a small prescribed burn to remove some of that to get more seed to soil contact. And when that burn happens and you see the black ash, that's actually fantastic nutrient cycling. Alternatively, you could mow it really short. Likely you can't graze it short because you probably don't have livestock in the area, but you could mow it short and try to expose some of that bare ground. But what a fantastic situation to have where you already have native plants established and not much bare ground showing.
Well, it is a prairie restoration project. So, and it's not the whole park that we're doing. We're just doing a small prairie restoration. So we're working on it.
That's exciting. Yeah, if you do not have invasive grasses in the area and you feel comfortable putting out a small burn, that might start to get you some plots that you could plant in. And you may want to, I would actually suggest doing it in sections, planting one section at a time. But what's already established is going to come back, and then you can just add your seeds in on top of that. Check the chat box here.
Yeah, there are invasive grasses that we're working on. Yeah.
Okay. I am leery of burning invasive grasses because if you think about prescribed burning as leveling the playing field for all the plants that are there, invasive grasses usually have a leg up. And so they tend to come back a little bit faster, a little bit stronger than our natives, and could easily take over after a situation like a burn or even mowing very short. You might see them increase in density.
Yeah, we have KR, unfortunately.
And I would probably not burn that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, I really appreciate y'all joining us today. I hope it wasn't too much of a advertisement for our online course, but we did want to mention that it's available just because we hadn't got it out there very much. And I think there's a lot of usefulness to finding something all in one place.
That's great. Exactly. And thank you so much again, Dr. Clayton. And again, thank you to Dr. Falk. And thank you all for taking the time to join us in falling in love with native seeding. Hope you all had a great time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, y'all. Happy late Valentine's Day.
Bye.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Bye-bye.